Adventures in a Banyan Tree by Ruskin Bond.
Profile of Ruskin Bond.
At my grandfather's house in the town of Dehra, India, there was a magnificent old banyan tree nestling in a valley at the foot of the Himalayas.
As grandfather at the age of 65 could no longer climb the tree, it belonged to me.
My first friend and familiar was a small grey squirrel. At first he was resent my invasion of his privacy. But when he found that I was harmless, he became friendlier. His friends and relatives probably thought him headstrong and foolish for trusting a human. When I started leaving him pieces of cake and biscuit, he grew bolder and finally became familiar enough to take food from my hands.
In the spring, when the banyan tree was full of small red figs, birds of all kinds would flock into its branches. During the fig season, the banyan tree was the noisiest place on the road.
Halfway up the tree, I had built a small platform on which I would often spend the afternoons when it wasn't too hot. I could read so many books like Treasure Island, Huckleberry Finn, the Mowgli stories, etc., propping myself up against the bole of the tree with cushions taken from the drawing room.
When I did not feel like reading, I could look down through the banyan leaves at the world below. I saw a huge black cobra gliding out of a clump of cactus, and a mongoose emerged from the bushes and went straight for the cobra.
Cobra knew only too well that the grey mongoose, 3 feet long, was a superb fighter, clever and aggressive.
Same way, the cobra was skillful and experienced fighter. He could move swiftly and strike with the speed of light, and the sacs behind his long, sharp fangs were full of deadly venom.
Hissing defiance, his forked tongue darting in and out, the cobra raised 3 of his 6 feet off the ground and spread his broad spectacled hood. The mongoose bushed his tail. The long, thick hair on his spine stood out.
There were 2 other spectators besides me to watch the fight, a myna and a jungle crow. They had eagerly settled on the cactus to watch the great battle and its outcome. They not only wanted to watch the battle but also wanted to take part in it.
As the cobra stood on the defensive, swaying slowly from side to side to mesmerize the mongoose into making a false move, the mongoose refused to meet the cobra's glassy, unwinking eyes. Instead, he fixed his gaze at a point just below the cobra's hood and started attacking. Immediately the cobra struck so swiftly, but the little fellow jumped neatly to one side and bit swiftly the snake on the back.
Each time they fought, the birds dived at the snake, bumped into each other instead, and returned shrieking to the cactus.
For the third round of the same course, the crow and myna dived at the cobra but missed each other and their mark. The myna flew to safety, but the crow tried to pull up in mid-air and turn back, but was struck with great force. After fluttering about for a while, it lay dead in the garden.
Each time the cobra attacked, the mongoose sprang aside, jumped in and bit. The cobra started to bleed. Finally, the cobra was weakening and the mongoose fearlessly fighting. At last, the snake had ceased fighting.
The mongoose gripped it round the hood and dragged it into the bushes. The miner witnessed all this. Then with shrill cry of congratulation, flew away.
I told grandfather about the fight. He was pleased that the mongoose had won. He had encouraged it to live in the garden to keep away the snakes and fed it regularly with the scraps from the kitchen. He had never tried taming it because wild mongoose was more useful than a domesticated one.
Grandfather had bought a white rat from the bazaar. I would often take it with me into the roots and branches of the old tree, where it soon struck up with a friendship with one of the squirrels.
One day, grandmother's knitting was missing. I was in search of it. Next day, I found it in the hall of the banyan tree. I discovered that the hall was crammed with knitting, and amongst the wool were 3 baby squirrels, all of them white. When I mentioned the white rat's frequent visit to the tree, grandfather told me that the rat must be the father. He said that rats and squirrels were related to each other, so it was quite possible for them to have offspring.